G'day and welcome to another episode of What If It's Cool, the show where we talk about anything and everything that is cool in the world today. I am Crocodile Daniel Paul Crow. With me is a lovable larrikin, that is him, and the pom from across the pond, our special foreign correspondent, Ewan. How we going, boys?
Yes, very good, thank you.
Such a delay.
Yeah, I was actually focusing on something else, but I was surprised that you decided to say lovable larrikin and Crocodile Dundee.
Well, you know, I have to give a nice intro every now and again.
I was secretly hoping that you would describe me as the last of the V8s, but yeah.
Oh, we can do it again if we really want to go.
The Interceptor.
The last of the Interceptors. Well, first and foremost, boys, happy Australia Day. Hope you're all enjoying the public holiday that we have. Except for you, Ewan. You're in the UK, so you won't get a public holiday.
No holiday for me.
Not this year, at least. But yeah, having a good Australia Day.
Well, today we are doing a movie that, firstly, I have never even seen, and this is a great franchise, Australian franchise, Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. What can I say? Has Mel Gibson, has BDSM-looking people, and the best thing about Australia, V8s.
Yeah, what more could you ask for, really?
I know, right?
Yeah, it was surprising that it took us so long to even decide on watching this movie, because we were debating on other Australian films to watch, and I am so glad that we decided not to watch Baz Luhrmann's Australia and have that as our movie for this episode.
God, I think I got about 5 minutes into that film before turning it off. Apologies to any listeners who like that film.
Was there people that liked that movie?
There are so many good Australian films, and the fact that that was the one that sort of stood out for us before we even settled on doing Mad Max. Thank you to Ziggy for suggesting that we do a Mad Max film. That really saved my sanity for this episode. But yeah, eventually we got onto this, and yeah, it's just such a treat to watch.
It's such a great example of Australian new wave cinema, and it's just such a great action film all round. It's often on telly, so I sort of catch it every few years, and it's it's a real powerhouse of a film.
Yeah, well, speaking of the movie, it opens quite magnificently, I would say. The narration that really opens it captures everything that's happened since the first movie, and there's just such a great amount of lines in it that, you know, to do it all I probably wouldn't be able to do it justice. But I swear, when I first watched this, I seem to have misremembered it. I thought that there was going to be a reference to something called the Gasoline Wars or the Fuel Wars, because I was thinking that it would make a really cool title. In fact, the narration doesn't feature anything about that or any mention of it. It just alludes to two great societies going to war. But if they had actually named it like the Gasoline Wars or whatever, I would have thought that it would have fit in terms of pop culture with all of those other types of wars that you hear about but you don't see in films, such as, prior to the series, like the Clone Wars. In Doctor Who, there's the Time Wars. In Star Trek Discovery that I'm watching now, they reference something called the Temporal Wars. You know, they always come up with these really catchy titles for these great battles or these great conflicts that happen that you don't get to see. But, you know, it would actually make you try to imagine it, you know, try to think about what would have happened in this. But with this, instead, we get this really great series of historical footage, but also they cut into it footage from the first movie. So you actually don't need to watch the first movie. You know what's happened in the prior film just by watching this 5-minute intro.
I found in my research here that when they were making the first one, the writer was sort of riffing off the oil crisis in 1973.
That's right.
And that he noted that people had got really tetchy at the fuel pump because they had these big queues. People were getting, very violent towards each other if people tried to push in or anything like that, and it sort of struck a chord with him, and was a good idea to sort of base some kind of what if science fiction apocalypse, where suddenly what would happen if something that people take for granted, such as gasoline, which obviously allows people to move around. If you take that away, what effect does that have on society? And it's a really interesting way that they've sort of put that together.
Yeah, and then basically envisaged, a post-apocalyptic society. And it's definitely something that they cover in a lot of the films. So with this one, it's fuel, but then in Mad Max Fury Road, it's the monopoly on water. So a lot of the things that sustain us, the necessities, because everything by comparison is really a creature comfort.
The intro really sort of is very concise, without sort of having to give too much detail. It's kind of put together like a sort of old newsreel with a sort of black and white, slightly squarish dimension. So it's almost like you're just getting a recap of... It looks almost a little bit like when you see sort of Second World War footage. And they obviously cut that in with bits and pieces from the first film. And you get a real sense of... with the music as well, you get a sort of a real sense of the pointlessness of the way that people can treat each other over a natural resource. I think that the line which struck me was "Man turned on man," or "Man began to eat on man."
Yeah,
I found that very sort of very affecting, and then this idea that if you can move around, if you do have the gasoline or a monopoly on gasoline, then you suddenly get this power over other people. So it's gonna start, and you get a sense of society sort of breaking down within Mad Max 1, albeit the hospitals are still running and the police force is sort of trying to hold things together. But by the second Mad Max film, there's hardly any gasoline anywhere, and really the gangs have taken over, and it's because that their sort of tribal warfare is taking all this gas, and then they're able to assert their power, much in the same way as you say in the Mad Max Fury Road, when obviously the natural resource that they're fighting over is Coca-Cola or water. If you don't have water, then you can't live. So essentially you can do whatever you want to the local population because they're essentially slaves.
These are the two main necessities. It does sort of make you think, like, what then are they going to fight over in future installments? Because this isn't really over at this stage. But with regards to that opening narration, I did there was just this one reading of one of the lines that just really stood out to me. I just remembered that the narrator had said, "Ready to wage war for a tank of juice." Like, just that pause. I don't know why, but like that pause really stood out to me, and it was just so emphatic that he was really, really trying to drive this point that people were really just after a tank of juice in order to continue that movement. And, obviously gangs would band together, and that's basically where we find ourselves.
They build a house of straw, I think, is another good line from there. And then the one which really got me was when he was talking about the roads themselves. It's a white line nightmare. There was good alliteration in that, and it was really sort of brought home this idea of the road being something that is an arena for this violence and for this battle and this struggle to sort of take place.
It immediately cuts to action, and Dan, I was just going to ask what your thoughts were once it really got into that after that opening narration, which we've covered.
Well, it's definitely something that I wasn't expecting for, because I was just whenever you have a movie that starts off with like a narration, it usually just like it slowly leads into action. This went right full blown into it, and I thought it was fantastic. Just seeing that V8 monster of a car just go down the highway. It's probably going like maybe 150 down the highway. I'm just like, so much machismo is just going right into it. Just before we move on to that scene, I just wanted to point out something that you guys may not have known. That monologue was never actually in the original cut in Australia. That was filmed for the Road Warrior version for America, which has now been all obviously put together for worldwide distribution. So yeah, I thought that was a really cool. But here's the other shitty thing about it. In the TV version, in the American one, it's actually overdubbed by an American. It's not actually done by the. I'm guessing it's another Aussie who's doing the narration for that. But yeah, I found that out and I heard it. I was just like, this sounds really weird.
Did they dub over the whole of the first one?
The
as well?
whole thing.
The whole movie.
Oh no, just the narration, not the whole movie, just the narration.
That's awful.
Yeah. But that whole chase scene was just great.
Yeah, it really just gives you that sense of, this is really going to boil down Mad Max to the basics, like everything that worked so well in the first movie, and it's just going to throw it at you. And I've mentioned to both of you off camera that Mad Max 2, like what it is to Mad Max 1, is very similar to what Aliens is to Alien. Like it's got more of the action elements, more, and in this case, more of the cars. It's just a lot of the spectacular stunt work that was really quite amazing to see in the first movie, but done bigger and better.
Yeah,
he's got a bigger budget and he's really gone to town, and he's almost had his test case, doesn't he? And so the first one doesn't have a huge amount of plot in it, and they've sort of gone with that for the second one too, where they've just extra cars, extra bangs, extra violence, extra bad guys. It's full throttle. I love the opening scene. The camera comes right out of the is it the nitro or at the front of the car? That's the sort of, it pulls out of it, and you can see. The first shot you get is Max, and you get that roar of the engine, which I noticed they used in Mad Max Fury Road as well. The first thing you hear is just that, and it just brings you straight in. And it's it just doesn't really let off from there. Really, it's just action packed all the way, and that first sequence is just put together so nicely. It's you get a sort of an interchange. You get the wide establishing shot, usually with a tracking cam, either in front of the car looking backwards, or behind the car and looking forwards, or you'll get a shot low down, which really puts you with a great sense of speed, and also right into the action, right into how it feels for the driver to be there. And I don't think there's anything wasted in that section at all. It's fast editing, but it's not so fast that it's trying to fake the action. You can see exactly what's happening with each shot, and it takes the time to even sort of build in plot elements. So you get shots of the dog, so you can see that that's his mate on his lonely road, and then you get a shot of the gasoline tank slowly getting down to zero. So they're already telling you that this is a bad situation for Max in that he's been attacked for one thing, but he kind of almost needs this. He needs to be attacked because he needs new fuel. So you kind of already are opening up with the question of who's feeding off who here. Who's really the bad guy in this situation? Is it the bad guys who are trying to attack him, or is he actually attacking them?
I do love that he flicks off the turbo or something like that, and then he slams on the brakes as well, so that the two guys that have now sort of cornered him, they flanked the car. I love how he slams on the brakes so that they end up shooting each other with their arrows, and that was really cool. And then he flicks the turbo back on, it revs back, it spools back up, and then he just takes out one of those cars before he starts to collect the fuel. But that villain, who we later learn is Wes, that animalistic sort of scream that he yells towards Max, like it just goes to highlight that they've devolved even further. It's like a very basic sort of thing, and obviously it's now a very barbaric time, and I think that having something like that really just helped highlight that these villains are wilder than the villains in the first one. The first one, Ewan, you said that they were quite theatrical, and it sort of hewed a bit closer towards, in my mind, Alex and his gang in A Clockwork Orange. They're quite almost proper with the way that they talk, and you said theatrical, they sort of pranced around. But these guys are just more based on that primal sort of urge.
There's no humour at all to them. In the first one, they're kind of dancing around like they're having a jolly good time, even though what obviously they're doing is just terrible. But it's almost like as the world has disintegrated, so have the gangs. They've become more and more sort of bestial, and they're kind of breaking down in that there's hardly any dialogue, hardly any of them even speak. They, as you say, the writings sort of from the first film sort of hinted at the fact that, you know, that these gangs sort of like whoop and scream to show their enjoyment, but in this one they're howling like packs of animals.
And they're even referenced as being dogs of war. So
yeah, agreed.
Yeah, they are quite animalistic. But the main bit that I sort of found would be more of a reference to maybe the remaining bit of humanity in Max was that music box. So he scavenges his music box from the truck's cabin, and as he's winding it and then hearing the theme, it actually just makes him smile. Yeah. And it's a rarity in this because, you know, everything is just based off of fight or flight, but it's a rarity to see that sort of emotion, especially from Max. Perhaps it's more of a reminder of a simpler time, or you know, the humanity that was once lost, that they once had but is now lost. And I do like that it factors in much later in the piece. But after we see this, we've got the gyro captain, and the gyro captain is quite a significant character later on. But I do really like that for a post-apocalyptic movie, they've hired people who aren't necessarily the most attractive people. And I mean, I don't mean any offense by that comment, but when you see shows like Walking Dead, when you see other post-apocalyptic films, let's say the Resident Evil series, they tend to hire all these people who look like models. They don't look like people who've been suffering through a post-apocalypse. They don't look dirty enough, for one. Their teeth are just perfectly straight and white.
Yeah.
Bruce Spence, the gyro captain, get him, he's super scruffy, but also his teeth are just yellowed and chipped. It's, you know, there's this really disgusting look to it. Because, yeah, like, if there is a post-apocalypse, you're not going to be getting very good dental.
It's true. They go all out with the costume and the production design, don't they? I often thought in whilst watching The Walking Dead, I'm wondering, you know, where's this salon that everyone seems to be able to go to?
This new post-apocalyptic chic.
They all seem to have access to it. But hair's always great.
But yes, once we see this, obviously the main part in this first third of the film is that they then move towards observing quite possibly the last oil refinery, which is under siege by Lord Humongous and his gang. Now, Lord Humongous's gang is...
I'm sorry, I just can't take that name seriously, Lord Humongous. It's just that every time I hear that, I just giggle. How did he get that name?
He's pretty huge, dude. I think it states how big he is. Dude, he's just shredded. He's so ripped. Even his head's got like bulges and veins that pop while he's talking. He's just a massive, massive unit.
He looks like Demolition Smash from the WWF days, you know? Like, I'm pretty sure that's probably where they got the look and the character feel from this movie.
Is it pre Friday the 13th or?
Yes, it is.
It is. Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, I did maybe think that this could be a Friday the 13th inspired, you know, mask, but yeah, like apparently it's before that even. But it's such a fantastic mask, and a lot of the costumes for this, Dan, you should know about this because the costumes come from your favourite stores in Melbourne.
Oh, they certainly do. I'm always heading off to places like BDSM for Us, Sexyland, and you and me and the Whip.
There's a lot of sports equipment as well. I noticed that they all seem to be wearing is it American football padding or hockey padding. There was a run on that after the apocalypse, so people stocked up on it. But I like the way that even though, you know, as you're saying, like this production design, the costume design, the hair, the makeup, and the, you know, even down to the picking of the actors to have a certain look for this film. it's not afraid of showing its kind of Western, traditional Western, spaghetti Western roots. So the people in the compound are wearing very similar type gear, except rather than leather, they've got sort of a white linen, and they're all in white. So white equals the good guys, I guess, in the traditional kind of Western folklore, and then the bad guy will all be in black. And so, you know, the gang is all in these leather with chains and studs and all kinds of weird masks and that kind of thing. It makes them far more menacing, but it's a film which is all about the action. So it doesn't need to take its time to flesh out all of these characters in any meaningful way. What we need to know is who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. And so a lot of that production design is really successful and just looks great. I mean, it looks fantastic. It's been so influential in popular culture since its make. I mean, you still see it now. In fact, I think there's a festival in California. There wasn't one this year, but it's been going for about 10 years. I think it's called the Wasteland Weekend, where people dress up like this and they go to the festival and just hang out in sort of Mad Max gear and do, you know, have raves and stuff like that out in the desert. So it's so effective for the film, but it's had a resonance almost to a point where, you know, when people think about post-apocalypse or apocalypse, that's kind of what you think about. You think that, you know, crazy people in crazy clothes.
Dan, if we ever get a chance to go over to California, maybe you and I can wear our matching arseless chaps to this festival, because, you know, the Wes cosplay I think would be a real hit there.
Yeah, I think that would be a really great idea.
Some of the stuff that we talked about, again off camera, but I think it warrants mention here. I did say that there is wonderful psychology at play here, and Ewan, you agreed with that point and said, you know, like I brought up the fact that there's a very BDSM appearance to Lord Humongous and his Dogs of War's gear. Like, it doesn't look very functional to me, but, you know, there's a lot of leather, there's a lot of, you know, spikes, studs, what have you. Wes has the arseless chaps. But the psychology behind this, you were saying, yeah, it could be a sign of, you know, well, civilization has further deteriorated and crumbled away, like it's virtually non-existent. And perhaps it's a sign, you know, this BDSM wear that they've got, perhaps it's a sign that deviant behavior is probably even more amplified in this wasteland as compared to the first film.
I think a lot of their power in these of these gangs is their power of causing terror in other people, and I think just having sort of sexualized costumes lends to this idea of that their violence is sexually based violence. You do get a rape scene halfway through it. There's similar scenes in Mad Max 1. They don't show anything that's not graphic at all. They cut away before anything, you know, graphic needs to be shown, but it's just there, and what it does is it just adds to the menace, and it adds to the, you know, the terror of these characters. If they get hold of you, you're a goner.
Yeah, there's the fella in the first one who'd been sodomized, possibly, because you see the chap who got caught, he's running away, and then he's got blood in certain areas, and, you know, like you said, there's a lot of the sexual violence, but here I think maybe they've gone more towards the even further primal urges. And yeah, like just seeing, you know, the chains and what have you. I mean, there's even a scene where Wes is literally being held by a dog collar and chain. You know, and it just further highlights that image that, you know, they've become even more barbaric, but also, yeah, there's also that animalistic side of them that is basically on full display.
The other thing, which is the terrifying, is that they seem happy to sort of crucify people but rather using crosses, they use the cars themselves as a sort of surrogate for the cross, to sort of display their victims before, you know, doing away with them or using them as sort of human battering rams in a way, which is just a terrifying thought. And when the compound decides that they're not going to take the deal. They're not going to leave the compound. They sort of have this massive bonfire party. You sort of only see it in a big kind of wide angle shot from far away, but the implication is basically that they've strapped a few people that they've caught to bonfires, and they're now having a good old dance while they burn them. It's really quite dark and terrifying stuff.
Sounds like a really bad Wicker Man impersonation. But don't forget as well, Max has already sort of gone into his own madness, because we've left out one important thing. He starts eating dog food.
I don't think that's a madness sign, though. I think that's just more because there's no other food around.
I don't know. I mean, have you ever tried dog food?
Well,
I think you have to be pretty mad to eat it.
I think this is the story where you say that you've tried some?
No comment.
Well, the dog food scene's quite good. It's quite funny, isn't it? Because there's a sort of a hierarchy that Max is the top dog here, and then the dog is second dog here, and then the gyro captain only gets to get the scraps right at the end. But I mean, they've descended to this point that they're all so hungry that he's standing there waiting for the dog to finish with a wooden spoon, and he's still sort of licking his lips.
Yeah, I just love the name of it.
Dinky Die.
Yeah, Dinky Die.
I think that was
How Aussie can you get?
I think that was one of the few colloquialisms that were sort of left in this movie. So I think they may have even just dialed down a bit on the Aussiness of this film, because you don't really hear a lot of that in this movie. You know, you sort of hear more of it in Mad Max 1. So when there's the first chase sequence, they're like, you know, rip the guts out of it, give it the bejesus. You know, like you don't really hear a lot of that in this film. But
Charlie copped a saucepan in the throat.
Yeah, that's what hurts. It's one of our V8s. Pursuit Special on methane, very towy.
Oh, I love Aussie lingo.
I mean, there are elements of it here, and I think they're they're largely taken out from the first one, but they're still there, and they're still very powerful sort of signposts for this idea of Australian new wave films of the 70s and 80s. So you can see them in, you know, Dinky Die. The landscape itself is quintessentially the Australian outback. That when they're saying that they're going to go to the land of milk and honey, it's a postcard for the Sunshine Coast. And that obviously, you know, a lot of the actors are Australian actors, and so yeah, I kind of dig that. There are just those little Australian touches which just mark it out separate from if this film was made in America, although this film probably was made largely with American money. It's made by Australian filmmakers with a largely Australian cast, and so that's, I mean, that can't help but show through, and it's really nice. I love to see it.
And then from then on, it's basically just go. Everything once Max reaches the refinery, that's when the action really just sort of picks up, and you know, the Western influences are seen greatly from this point. I read this Washington Post article from when the movie was released in the US, or due to be released in the US, that there was a lot of influences that they could see, such as Kurosawa, Peckinpah, or Leone. One can't help but sort of imagine the sort of Seven Samurai setup to this movie. So, you know, there's the town that's under siege, and instead of villagers, we've got, you know, quite possibly the last bastion or the last remnants of humanity, of civilized people or civilized folk, defending this village or refinery in this case, and they're being besieged by bandits or Lord Humongous, you know, this roving gang. And yeah, Max, well, you know, he can sort of easily step into the role of all seven of the samurai. He's the best chance that they've got at getting out of there. And you know, I do like how he strikes the deal. It's so matter of fact, you know, especially with how he says it. You know, it's one of the few times where, like, I think his Aussie accent really shines through, because the dialogue in this is quite sparse, and it's very similar to Fury Road. Fury Road has very little dialogue for Tom Hardy, but everything that he says is just so matter of fact. Like what he says to the gyro captain earlier, he goes, you know, the arrangement was I wouldn't kill you. I reckon you got a bargain, don't you?
Very much so. And he walks straight into the compound, and he's like, all right, I've made a deal with this guy. And he's like, oh, thank you. Yeah, I've actually made a deal with this guy. Can I get my gasoline now? And because he wants to get in, he wants to get out. I
just want to get my gasoline to go.
Yeah. And then even, once you see Lord Humongous and his Dogs of War leave, and then from then on, it's basically just go. Think of it as down payment. I did really like just how he said it, but also really enunciated and really just let that Aussie twang shine through. Because again, it's used very sparingly in this film.
I miss it when Mel Gibson did Aussie movies. I love his Aussie accent, and I forgot he grew up here. But yeah, he doesn't do any Aussie movies anymore. Not really doing many movies anymore, to be honest. But yeah, that's another conversation for another day. One thing I wanted to point out as well is Wes's character demeanor, everything did inspire the Road Warriors tag team from in wrestling, and I'm looking at it and thinking, where did it come from besides the shoulder pads? I'm just like, the whole demeanor, like his character, like the grunts and everything. They never said much. They never sort of like thought their process. They just went right through it, and I just like, this is a great little piece of history that should be mentioned, because this movie had influenced so many people, but it also influenced another industry, not just music, not just film, but in the professional wrestling scene. And that's fairly fantastic. And it was actually the very first pro wrestling movie theme that had ever been incorporated, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah. Just on that with the costumes and what have you. So, I love how their costumes were influenced by Wes and the Dogs of War. But I forgot to mention earlier that I really love how Max is retained with his costume. He's still wearing his Main Force Patrol uniform, but there's the extra addition, because I think his knee got shot out in the first movie, so now he's got a leg brace that he wears. But for further functionality, he's got tools just hanging from his main jacket. And so I did really love that, because it's very much part of him. There is also that added functionality, and because more than likely he has to fix this car on the go. And I guess the best way to describe it is there's nothing really extra in this. Everything has a use or a place. Everything is there for the survival of these characters, and I just really, really enjoyed that. But with the gang, I really did like Toady as well. Toady came across as like a conductor. So the cars were all revving when they were outside the refinery. And once he signaled like that, all of the cars just knew to stop, just turn off their engines. So it's like, he's conducting this symphony of madness, or this symphony of vehicles. I did really, really enjoy that. This scene is so important at introducing us to all of the principal players. But, Dan, you've obviously picked up on Wes. I've picked up on Toady, but we've also forgotten about, one, the feral kid, and two, the warrior woman. I think the warrior woman is fantastic in this. She is just so badass.
I wish she got more lines, or at least more of a story. I felt like she wasn't utilized too much, which kind of sucks. So I'm thinking, because even like, just to fast forward into the story, the way she died as well, I'm just like, oh, come on, could have been a lot better. But I mean, it is what it is, but it's just, I think at that point they were they wanted just to focus on Max, and then just whole story. They didn't want to sort of build any other sort of character unless it was for comic relief, or in the case of Feral Kid, to set up for the ending. That's all.
Yeah.
So
with Warrior Woman, though, you did mention that it was a missed opportunity with her, and not really giving her much of a moment. But I just love her look. Virginia Hay, incredibly beautiful in this movie. She ended up moving on to
gorgeous.
be as Zahn in Farscape, which is a great series.
That's right.
But I think that maybe the creators or the writers, or maybe even Miller himself, would have picked up on this. But I think she could have really been the template or the blueprint for what would later become the Furiosa character in Fury Road. Now, Dan, I know you haven't seen Fury Road yet, and I think after today you really should move on to it. But
Yui, I'm definitely going into it. I'm getting really excited now.
Yui, do you reckon that Warrior Woman could have been the prototype for Furiosa?
I think so. I don't think that the portrayal of female characters within the compound is a bad one. I think that I take the point that, you know, they don't get a huge amount of camera or lines or that kind of thing. I think that's probably more to do with the fact that, you know, clocking in at just over an hour and a half, I think they want to sort of keep sort of things rattling along, so they can't spend that time to flesh out as many characters they would do. But I definitely think that she's a strong character and is portrayed that way. And when they send the oil tanker off to, you know, obviously it's going to be attacked by, you know, the entire gang, they pick her because she's the most badass to be one of the people who defends the trailer. And that's a decision based on, you know, the characterization of that particular person. She's one of their best fighters, that, you know, and she's up front with one of the sort of flamethrower guns right from the off. I think she comes across as a very strong character, and also kind of a streetwise character, even within the lines that she does have. It's, you know, don't trust this guy, you know, as Max comes in, you know, she's naturally suspicious, she's got street smarts, but then, you know, when he comes back with the goods later on, when he brings the trailer back, she realizes the quality within, you know, Max the character, and says, you know, I was wrong about you. So, you know, she's got smarts, but she's also strong. I also think that, you know, the other female characters in it, you know, they have voices, and there's the one scene with the gyro captain wants to take one of the younger female characters away with him to safety with the gyrocopter, but she says, no, this is my family, these are my people, I'm going to stay. Yeah, their fate is my fate. So I think that, you know, that there's some interesting characters and characterizations in there. I'm really loving the you know, Charlize Theron's role in well, I love pretty much everything to do with the Mad Max Fury Road. I mean, it's one for another day, but yeah, no, I think it's entirely plausible that he could have fleshed out that character from that character. I don't know that by any means, but you know, it's entirely possible.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't find anything about it, whether or not.
She looks like she's been starved very similarly as well, isn't she? Like, yeah, the pads and the sort of white kind of costume. I think the feral kid's interesting as well, and in that he's a personification of this new world, which no doubt he's been born into. He's likely, you know, born just before the apocalypse, or indeed afterwards. So he has no language. He probably had no parents, and so he's a real sort of microcosm for what society will become if, you know, the adults who are left end up just killing each other, and then, you know, the sparse amount of people who are born into this new world won't have language. All that they'll have is their own smarts, and he's got them in spades. And so although he is, you know, the feral kid, and he grunts and snarls and, you know, and doesn't really understand really what he's doing, he saves Max's ass a couple of times, and he's not afraid to get you know, deep into the action, and he's not afraid to take bad guys on. And of course, you know, you find out later that, you know, when he does get that language, when he does grow to become an adult, that he, you know, has the potential to become a leader, to become, you know, a civilized person and a leader of a tribe. And so I think that's a really smart bit of characterization and writing, because he's a product of the apocalypse, but there's still the humanity within him to become a great person. That potential is still there.
They keep the kid, I think they keep a lot of these characters quite principled, and, you know, it's quite subtle. Sometimes it can be quite overt. So, you know, Warrior Woman says, wrong, we fight for a belief, I stay. And the girl that Gyro Captain was really interested in, well, she says, you know, these are my family, and she makes that choice. So a lot of them tend to keep to their principles and beliefs. And I think Feral Kid, you know, he's probably gone the other way of the spectrum despite becoming more feral. So while Lord Humongous and his gang, they indulge in their base desires, Feral Kid, you know, like, he's got a very strict code where he just stands up for what he thinks is right, even though, you know, he comes across as really uncivilized, and all he can ever really do is utter grunts and growls and snarls. But, you know, like, he sees that there's something wrong and he goes to fight it. But I did like the the bit where he was gifted the music box. So that for me functioned as a sign of Max's humanity. Like, it wasn't him angling for anything in particular. He actually gave it to the kid just to make the kid smile. And it's paid back to Max later on. And, you know, on the first watch, you could have said that, you know, that would have really just bought feral kids loyalty and obedience like a dog. But I think he has flashes of humanity more so than any of the other human characters in the film. And especially when he really helps Max back up on his feet, quite literally, and also gets him his gear back. And he acts as a support for Max as Max walks towards the refinery workers to offer them his help in the final push.
I'll drive the tanker.
Yeah, that's right.
I love his costume. Like, I know we were just talking about before, but I really love the black leather. I love the fact that, because I've seen little bits and pieces of the first one, but I love the fact that the one of the arms, what's part of the shirt, the part where you have your arm? I forgot what it's called.
Sleeve?
Sleeve, yeah, the sleeve. Jeez. That's been ripped off. Later, like in the later movies that I've seen the posters, I see that the costume has been deteriorated even further. I don't even know what he looks like in Fury Road, but I'm assuming that it's completely gone by then. But yeah, like it shows that he's continuing to madness. Like, if I was in that, I'll be trying to find new clothes, but he's just like, he's gone to smells like, nah, done everything, and he's just going like that.
It's this like iconic armor, I guess, of Max, isn't it? That
yeah.
Sort of the road leathers. You know, he's taking it from his old police days. He puts them on when he has to take care of business.
It's all an extension of him.
Yeah.
You know, I think the uniform, the tools, the car,
the sawn-off shotgun.
Yeah, all of that is quintessentially him, but he's not complete unless he's within his car. And I think that one of the main points that highlighted that is from the first movie, which we all managed to check out. When he's out of the car, that's when he's at his least complete. You know, he ends up getting his knee blown out and his arm rolled over.
He's vulnerable.
You know, he's completely vulnerable. But when he's in it, when he's behind the wheel of the Interceptor, he is almost unstoppable. And even though I did say he's almost unstoppable, I had to highlight the almost part, because when we get into the third act, this is what I'd like to call the first tragedy of the piece. So I don't care about anyone else in the movie. Max tries to get away. You know, he's completed his bargain. He has all his fuel, all the fuel he can carry, and all the fuel to gas up the car.
It could be the end of the movie, couldn't it? He just races off into the sunset.
But he's racing away, and then, you know, Wes catches up to him, you know, with nitrous, I might add, and they trash the car, and he ends up just rolling it. And it was, yeah. I felt like this really is a tear-jerking kind of moment, because
this is where real men cry when the Interceptor gets rolled.
It's the last of the V8s.
The last of the V8 Interceptors is now gone. These bastards.
What I love about that, though, a couple of them are going to bring his name up again. We've had another couple of episodes where we never mentioned him. It's like the thing what I said about Guy Ritchie, you know, speed up, slow down, slow down, slow down. And this is speed up a lot. Whether it's because, like, Miller just felt it was because of the nitrous or whatever, but I thought, like, normally in other films I'll be like, oh, this is a piece of crap. I actually really liked the way that this whole scene handled out for that. How did you guys feel about that, seeing that now?
Yeah, I think there's a real reverence for the cars themselves, like in general, but especially, you know, this last of the V8's Interceptor is such a hero vehicle, and it looks great, and it's just so iconic, and in a way you kind of have to trash it. It's a bit like sort of trashing the Enterprise. They love doing that as well.
Yeah, they do.
It's like killing off a horse.
Yeah.
You know, so like, you know, they've killed off the cowboy's, you know, loyal servant, and now it really springs him into action. He's like, nah, you guys are going to pay.
Yeah, that's it. It's like, you know, it's all about, you know, his car was his, you know.
But they killed the dog as well.
I know, that's so awful.
Yeah.
So maybe this is where John Wick got the inspiration.
It could have been.
You killed my dog, motherfucker! You're gonna die now.
Very simple premise, but it led to such wonderful results.
I was just to say that you just reminded me that the dog is a cattle dog, isn't it? So it's another little piece of Australiana there.
Yeah,
the dog's so awesome.
I love the dog. I love how the dog is, how he's holding, he's holding onto the bone, which has the string attached to it to the trigger of the gun. Gyro Captain's.
That is the best bit.
Gyro Captain's just so nervous the whole time.
How Aussie is that scene? That whole scene is so Aussie. Like you just get your dog to do everything. But what I love that the fact that in the back seat he's got his own little kennel.
Yep.
Like, so remember when in the first scene where he goes back, he's like, oh, my master's just driving. Oh, shit, what's happening? Oh, great, I better go back to the front.
When he's saved by the Gyro Captain, though, there's that shot where he's just sort of hanging off the side of what you think is the gyrocopter. And it's just such an amazing shot, especially with that point of view, bird's eye point of view, looking down on the refinery as they're about to land and what have you. I can't remember... I don't think I've remembered this correctly, but did they use that similar shot in Gladiator? Like when he's sort of like on his back going through the fields?
I think so. Oh, yeah. When he was on the horse, right?
I haven't seen Gladiator in so many years, but it seems like they might have taken that particular shot from Mad Max 2. I don't know if...
Yeah, I believe that's just... I believe you're right on that one.
When he's been like taken into slavery, there is a kind of a shot where he's kind of still and then the ground is sort of moving below him. His arm's been cut, isn't he? So he's fighting the infection and he's going in and out of consciousness in the same kind of way that Max is in this.
It's very dreamlike, like the way that it moves. Like they're basically just between life and death. And I think it's a very wonderful and innovative sort of shot because, like a lot of this movie, again, often imitated, copied so much. It just has wonderful camera work that I think it really needs to be, complemented. And a lot of it makes its way into video games as well. I think that the bit where Max is crawling away from the wreckage, before he's even picked up by the Gyro Captain, there's like this sort of, blurriness effect, to each of his movements. Like that to me, it just looks very much like when you're low on health in a video game. It's really signaling to you that, you're basically at death's door and,
Yeah, it's mirrored in the sound as well, isn't it? It's like, all right, mate, you're okay. So it's all very slowed down.
What does he? So before we get into the finale, what does Max even say? I think he said, does he tell Papagallo to cut the crap? I think he said,
cut the crap.
Yeah, he goes, I'll drive. If it's all the same to you, I'll drive it. And he goes, no deals. Deals off the table. Cut the crap. But the one guy even says to her, he goes, you can drive a wheelchair.
The other thing I want to pick up before we do the last bit is that just how the landscape is so significant and iconic within sort of Australian new wave cinema. There's this kind of love for grand open spaces, and of course in Australia you have it in spades, and the outback is in so many films of that sort of 70s and 80s. I'm thinking Walkabout and Picnic and Hanging Rock and things like that, the landscape itself is almost a character, and in this film you just get such beautiful wide shots of I think it's the outback of on the border of New South Wales and South Australia outside Broken Hill, and it's just incredible, but they're very clever at how they use it at particular types of day. You get lots of shots either early in the morning or just at dusk, just so you get a sort of an extra sort of added depth to the way that the light falls on the rock formations and on the bushes and on the compound. There's a terrific shot when Max and the Gyro Captain and the dog are staking out the compound to start with, and you get this big, huge, sort of massive, ultra wide shot, and they're sort of foregrounding just in the bottom left-hand corner, just to give you the scale of how big this landscape is and how big they, this set, which obviously they've spent a lot of money on, and showcased with these cars going round and round it, and you get basically the whole film there in a single frame, and it's just it's just incredible. So if you are watching it, try and find as big a screen as you possibly can to watch it, because it's just so cinematic.
With the finale though, it's just balls to the wall, pedal to the metal, whatever you want to call it. It's absolute insanity for about the last 20 minutes or so of the film. It's maybe one of the best chase sequences, certainly I think the best chase sequence in Australian cinema history. But in terms of worldwide cinema history, I think it goes down as one of the greats in terms of a chase sequence. What did you guys pick up in this? Like it's just there's so much to say about it. What were some of the standouts for you guys?
There wasn't more of a standout for me. It's more the fact that I'm so used to seeing this in American films. The fact that this is in an Australian film gives me so much hope for the Australian film industry. I fucking love it. Like, I can't say about a lot of Aussie movies, especially Aussie action movies, but this is just absolutely... it's great. It's so good.
I think that for me, it's all about the texture of it. I mean, which really just brings you in. I mean, just with the way that it's shot, you get tracking aerials and then cutting down and then low wide shots to, add the speed, and then just the pace of the editing and a real reverence for, the cars themselves, the mechanics of the cars, how sort of heavy objects with, moving parts relate to each other when they hit each other, and how flash and weapons come together in a sort of high speed chase. You really sort of you can hear the sounds, you can sort of taste, you can smell the gasoline and the smoke and the dirt and just the attention to the detail and the blocking of how the action takes place. You get a real sense of, where people are and what they're doing. And that brings you into the action so well. And that's why I think that so often I see action films where I'm taken out of the action because they obviously just haven't blocked it properly. And you kind of just a sort of a very sort of passive observer of what's going on. But in this, you're in the cabin and there's people coming at you, and that's how you feel, or you're on the top. And just to have, it's have this sort of straight road where there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to escape, and you've got these cars coming in, almost like pirates jumping in from one ship onto another ship to try and take your ship down. It's just wonderful. And I mean, you're right, Tim. We could sort of wax lyrical about it for a long time, but I mean, those are the sort of the main points, I guess. It's just like I was saying at the beginning. It's this white line nightmare that once you're on the road, there's no rules. It's dog eat dog out there. It's and I think Max he's not flamboyant in this in the way that he drives. I think you touched on this earlier as well, that his power when he's behind the wheel, and he's almost invincible. But he's not rash. He's driving this truck, and he can maneuver a little bit. So, I mean, if a car comes up to the side of him, he can use the weight advantage of the truck to sort of crush it or to send it flying into the next car. Or, if he sees that he's about to be shot, he can tap on the brakes and then the car will go flying past. So he's very on point the whole time in the way that he doesn't panic. That's his power. I think that he knows he's in control the whole time. And he knows that he can just make those little adjustments. Whereas the dogs of war, they're all over the place. They're scattered, and they're all trying kind of crazy things, and they keep on making the same mistakes.
I think that the dogs of war in this really symbolize chaos, because it is a very chaotic sort of approach to how they're all just sort of jumping on there. Well, like wild rabbit animals, because Humongous lets the chain off Wes, and then Wes just goes to work. Like you said, Max is 100% in control the whole time. Also good at multitasking, I should add, because he can drive and shoot at the same time. There's this wonderful bit which I had to note down where he leans out of the cab of the truck and he's got the shotgun and he blasts one of the drivers through the windshield. That was a very cool shot. But also, just the stunt work in this is simply incredible. Like, there was a really cool stunt when Goose, in the first film, his bike locks up at high speed and then he comes flying off it. But there's this one where there's a crashed car and then one of the dogs of war crashes into it with his bike, and he just keeps flipping through the air before he skids. Like, this is just a real hallmark of great stunt work all throughout. And I put it down here. I go, look, I wouldn't be surprised if Krusty Demons of Dirt were somewhat influenced or inspired by this, because like all the stunts here look like they should be in one of their shows. But the final bit that I love is, Feral Kid just helps out. He tells Feral Kid that he needs to, bullet, get the bullet. He tells him to get that. But yes, so he goes out there and he tries to reach for it, and we think that Wes is dead, but then as the kid is about to grab the bullet, Wes obviously pops up from the front of the truck, screams in the kid's face. The kid screams, it just screams out. But the everything just literally comes crashing to an end once Lord Humongous decides to charge the truck with his NOS-fueled car. What did he think was going to happen there? Did he think he was really going to stop it without, like, injuring himself at all? Like, he has no plan. He just crashes right into it, and then, it just shatters into pieces.
Splat.
I have to rewatch it again, but because that always confused me what he was trying to do with that. But I think, like, maybe I was rewatching it today, and I think it's because there's a point that Max turns the rig around and he starts heading back in the opposite direction, and I think at that point Humongous has been knocked out of the game, but he wants to get back in the game as soon as possible, so then he nitros to catch up with everyone, and then he must realise that actually the truck's coming back the other way. That's the only bit of logic that I can think. Otherwise it's just like, he's like, damn this chase, I'm just gonna smash the guy out of the road. Just like...
But I liked how Humongous was saying about, this is earlier, there were a couple of lines that he said, but he was saying about Wes chasing after Max. This is earlier on in the beginning of the third act. He's like, "You disobey me, you puppy." Like, his lines are just so awesome. Like, there was even another bit where he was saying, so he was really pissed off that the refinery people, that they basically made their decision, but he was saying, nobody. Like, just the accent as well, it just made me think of Arnie. Like, I thought that this wouldn't have been out of place if it were played by Arnie. Like, he's just completely jacked, and he has a way of speaking that really sends the Dogs of War into, like, a rapturous sort of state. Like, he's very captivating. And I think a lot of the characterization could have been influenced by Hitler. Hitler would hold anyone who was present for his speeches in virtually spellbound. And I think that, some of the dialogue that has been given to Humongous and the way that it's been performed is probably quite representative of that he really knows how to hold a crowd.
He's obviously completely insane, but at the same time there is an intelligence there, and that's why obviously he's a powerful big guy, so he's an imposing sort of presence. But I think you're sort of touching on the idea that the way that he could command loyalty from this pack of other insane people is this intelligence, and there's something going on, devious intelligence, and which has allowed him to rise to become the head of this war band, and he has strategy, whereas all the others are just sort of mindless, violent pirate, whatever word you want to use for them, but just sort of outlanders. And but he's more methodical. He's we'll do it my way. We do it my way. That all that kind of thing. That makes him that more despicable, that more terrifying. That that someone who just basically is an amoral character has the power and, you know, can direct, you know, a large amount of terrible people to do terrible things in a very methodical way.
Yeah. Well, just the last bit revealed that Feral Boy is the narrator. I love that. I really do. Like it's because he had no humanity or even any English, and then we do later find out that, okay, so after all this events, he's actually grown up to be a somewhat, because we never actually see him, but somewhat of a decent human being.
And now the leader of the Northern Tribe.
Yeah.
No, it's a really good character touch, but there's a bittersweet quality to it because of especially what he says about Max. You know, he highlights that Max is, you know, now just sort of part of the memory, I guess. I didn't take down all the notes, and you know, well, really, that's, you know, how our legend's really created, through storytelling, and this is a story from his youth. You know, it's faded into his memory, and it's burned into his memory, but you know, it's fading, and yeah, well, you know, Max's legend is probably going to be told to other people that grow up in this Northern Tribe. But I think it was a strange choice to, well, when I was reading up on it, some reviewers were saying that it was a strange choice that they didn't have Max join up with the Northern Tribe. Like they said, well, he had a real redemption arc, but he could have really replaced his family, you know, with people like Warrior Woman and the Feral Kid as his son. You know, like they could have stood in place for Jesse and Sprog. But I mean, obviously Warrior Woman dies, and well, Feral Kid goes off with the rest of the Northern Tribe. But I would have thought that was too simplistic a reading of the movie. Like, I don't think that Max is intended to really rejoin civilization. Yes, he does have a redemption arc. You know, he ends up, it's almost a selfless act, but you know, it is by nature survival. If he doesn't have a car anymore, so he's completely screwed if they left him behind at the refinery. So that's why he has to drive the truck. But I think that it is very much like Westerns. So, you know, once the gunfighter has saved the day, sometimes they just ride off into the sunset. And well, yeah, I think that, you know, his madness is what allows him to thrive in the wasteland. So, you know, he's not really built for normal society anymore. These people are, you know, he wanted to give these people their best chance at living in a normal society, but he's by and large more than capable to survive anywhere. But being domesticated, I don't think that would suit him anymore.
I don't think he could ever do it again.
You know, there's the PTSD as well. You know, PTSD aspect. So I don't think he would be able to really recover from any of that trauma, and so he just continues. You know, he's that husk of a man that the narrator had hinted at in the beginning. You know, he's a shell, and he just has to keep moving in order for him to survive. Like every breath is really, you know, every place that he travels to is really just, you know, him. That's all he knows now.
By having him sort of fade away into memory, and in the way also visually he fades away, he kind of, you know, it goes to black. There's always this sense that he's out there somewhere. He's almost immortal and ever living, forever, you know, wandering the wasteland, trying to become a person again. And I see his arc in this, but it's an interesting sort of arc in that he doesn't do things that are morally right for anything other than survival. And he's not going to do bad things necessarily, and he doesn't kill unless he's threatened. But, you know, his motives through the movie are of, you know, survival. He needs gasoline, and then later on, somewhat, you know, we discussed before, is revenge. But it's interesting how all the other characters around him see that he's a good person, and they sense that goodness in him. They know that he's not one of these wasteland bandits. The gyro captain keeps on saying, we're partners, you know, and the kid wants to, you know, travel with him. He wants to go with him. He's putting his bags in his car and saying he wants to go out in the wasteland. And the people in the compound recognize very quickly that obviously he's a man of strength, but also he's a man of honor. You know, when there's a deal to be done, he'll stick to the deal. You know, he's not going to go back on the deal. And if you want to extend the deal, you can do that again. So it's interesting that, you know, he has this sense of humanity inbuilt, even though he is the shell of the man. He's lost his family. He really has nothing left to live for. He's just sitting out there existing. It's always there. It's never really been taken from him. It's just that he's lost his will to be that, you know, I mean, in the first film, he's a police officer. He's sort of fighting for truth, justice. But that's always still there. It's always still part of him. But as I take your point, Tim, I think that, you know, he belongs to the road. And so the road takes him.
I have to, this is slightly off topic, but I did say that there was very little in the way of Aussie colloquialisms, but it'd be remiss of me not to bring this one up. This is quite possibly one of the best Aussie examples throughout the entire movie. So Max has brought the rig back to the refinery earlier on, and then there's some damage to it. And 4 people have to communicate how much damage there is, and the messages that are just being relayed. I absolutely love that. Oh, she's got a cracked timing case cover. She's got a cracked timing case cover. Broken a couple of teeth off the timing gear. Broken a couple of teeth off the timing gear. Radiator's damaged at the core. Got a cracked water pump and a fractured injector line. Well, what does that mean? 24 hours? 24 hours! You got 12. Yeah, okay. That was,
you little beauty.
That was absolutely awesome, and
it is.
Yeah, it's probably.
It's
one
just
of those...
missing the bit where it's like he says, cost you about $400-500 plus parts.
Tell me he's dreaming.
Well, on that note, boys, obviously we've really enjoyed it, but let's ask the most important question we always ask on the show: is it cool?
Yes.
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 It's a resounding yes for all 3 of us. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any sort of disagreement on that one. I think that everyone is bound to enjoy this movie. We certainly did. It has just so many things going for it. It's aged incredibly well, and I think it's required viewing if anyone wants to watch a post-apocalyptic film. But I did want to ask you guys if you thought that there should be some kind of prequel for it. So they fought for oil fuel, they fought for water in Fury Road. I think there should be a prequel, because 2020 basically told us that everyone is willing to fight for toilet paper. So I think perhaps, you know, Mad Max the prequel should be the fight down at Woolies or Tesco's for some toilet paper or bog roll.
Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, Castbox and Stitcher. And while you're there, leave us a review. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and enable those notifications. If you can't wait for our next episode, why not check out our Tumblr page? Find us at What If It's Called Podcast. Make sure to find us on Facebook at What If It's Called Podcast, tweet us at What If It's Called, and find us on Instagram at What If It's Called Podcast. Keep that support coming. And until next time, folks, we'll catch you on the next cast.